All right, hello and welcome back to the Chadvocate channel, where we break down the daily news, politics, and policy. So, today we are going to be breaking down the UN climate analysis, Andrew Cuomo resignation, and the bipartisan infrastructure deal. On top of that, I want to do a little bit of background on an economist, ex-secretary of labor, Robert Reich. He's a big progressive in the lefty community, served on uh, Bill Clinton's administration as the labor secretary. So I kind of want to break down one of the videos that he did earlier this week. So why don't we start by getting into it with good old Andrew Cuomo. So Cuomo, after weeks or a few days now, it's been months while they were going through the investigation, he's finally resigned. They were going to impeach him. All right, so Andrew Cuomo, after a few days, he's been in limbo, saying nobody knew if he was going to resign, if he was going to be impeached. It looked like he was going to be impeached if he actually didn't take the step to resign after 11 women came out and said that he was sexually harassing them, former and current staffers. So everybody on the left and even almost the entire Democratic Party writ large was saying that it's time for him to go. So let's see what he had to say in his resignation today.
This situation, by its current trajectory, will generate months of political and legal controversy. That is what is going to happen. That is how the political wind is blowing. It will consume government. It will cost taxpayers millions of dollars. It will brutalize people. The State Assembly yesterday outlined weeks of process that will then lead to months of litigation. Time and money that government should spend managing COVID, guarding against the Delta variant, reopening upstate, fighting gun violence, and saving New York City. All that time would be wasted. This is one of the most challenging times for government in a generation. Government really needs to function today. Government needs to perform. It is a matter of life and death, government operations. And wasting energy on distractions is the last thing that state government should be doing.
So he's just going to go
and
say that, oh, this is just a big distraction after that horrendous video he put out of everybody hugging him and him giving kisses on the cheek. It was one of the worst videos I've ever seen.
And I love you. And everything I have ever done has been motivated by that love. And I would never want to be unhelpful in any way. And I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to government.
Oh, well, thank you for the lack of distraction.
And therefore, that's what I'll do.
There, Andy.
Because I work for you. And doing the right thing is doing the right thing for you. Because as we say, it's not about me. It's about we. Kathy Hochul, my lieutenant governor, is smart and competent. This transition must be seamless. We have a lot going on. I'm very worried about the Delta variant, and so should you be. But she can come up to speed quickly, and my resignation will be effective in 14 days.
This is the guy that, before they even came out with the report months ago, they gave him an out. They said, look, we're going to start a probe into you. And he knew, obviously, that he was guilty of all these actions, even if he wants to dodge this now. So he was given months to actually resign or to say he wasn't going to run for re-election. But he thinks, or at least he thought, he could follow the Trump model, where if he just denied, and pretended like nothing was going on, that he was going to get away with it. It's interesting. I was just having a conversation with one of my buddies yesterday, and he asked for my opinion on what do I think Andrew Cuomo's going to do. He thought he's never going to leave. Granted, he's more far right than I am. He's a college friend, lifting buddy, really close friends with him. He was under the impression that he was just going to get away with it, but I think that's because a lot of Republican mindset is that if you just wait it out and have people forget in the 24-hour news cycle, that you won't be held accountable for your actions. But why I'm on the left, and that's why I like to associate with the Democratic Party and progressives, social democrats, is because we want to hold these people accountable for their actions. It's completely unacceptable to be running around and groping staff members as the governor of New York State. I'm glad he's resigning. I'm sure a lot of people are. He is right in the sense that it was going to be a distraction, but it's all his own making. Never came out, not to my knowledge, apologized to any of the women. He hasn't taken culpability for his actions. So after a decade in public life, he's now resigning in disgrace. So long, Andy, and it was nice while we knew you.
A code red for humanity. Tonight we begin with the wake-up call from the United Nations on what they call the unequivocal impact humans are having on our planet. Their once-in-a-decade climate report is out today, and with it comes a warning about what could happen if humans do not aggressively change. It's the world's most expansive report yet into climate change, and there's no sugarcoating it. The UN report says at this point we are not able to stop global warming for at least 30 years. Essentially, a hotter future is already locked in, a future where extreme weather events like devastating fires, historic flooding, and extreme heat are all more common. The report's authors are essentially sending the world's leaders a final wake-up call: curb emissions and dramatically reduce consumption, or face a world that is fundamentally different. Around the world, fire crews are battling fires tonight on a nearly unprecedented scale. If seeing is believing, many are getting a first-hand look at a worst-case scenario for the future. But the report concludes there is still time to change. Our Maggie Rulli reports from Greece.
Code red for humanity. A dire warning tonight from the United Nations about our planet's future. Scenes more reminiscent of horror movies now playing out right before our eyes.
Very, very problem. My island is on fire.
This is Greece in 2021. Turkey, California, China, Germany. A brand new once-in-a-decade report from the UN is incredibly clear. We are altering our planet. The report detailing how climate change is making extreme weather worse in every region of the globe. Hotter heat waves, heavier rain, more extreme droughts, raging infernos.
You can hear the crackle of these flames. The fires are just ripping through the underbrush here. Look at that. We see it climbing up that tree. It is going all the way up the hillside. We have seen dozens of these hotspots popping up along the road. This is what firefighters are struggling to.
I still don't know why reporters do this. It's insane to me. It's like, you don't need to stand next to the fire or be in the hurricane. We understand shit wherever you are is really bad. You don't need to be standing next to a forest fire. Honestly, get the hell out of it. And we've been seeing more and more forest fires. The other day, I had to take a picture of it from my apartment. Looking out onto New York City, it looked like it was just foggy and the sun was red for some reason. So we just went about our day thinking that, it's just a foggy day in New York, kind of gloomy, until we realized that it's actually all the smoke from the West Coast that was just blanketing the East Coast. I went outside after work just to go to the gym. And of course, the whole Hudson River area, downtown Manhattan, it just smelled like smoke, and it was horrible. So this report is not surprising in the slightest to people who are paying attention. But the forest fires are even affecting the East Coast, and it's going to affect weather patterns. I was alive for Superstorm Sandy on the East Coast. That was insane. So we're just going to see more and more frequent, horrific climate events that are being exacerbated by climate change.
Keep up with.
Here in Greece, the fire is turning the sky a bloodshot, ominous red, forcing residents out of the Greek island of Evia, making conditions all the more difficult for the crews desperately trying to help them to safety.
My heart cries, I leave my family behind.
The Greek wildfires have been raging for more than a week. Neighboring Turkey finally got most of their fires under control after nearly 2 weeks, killing at least 8. And it's all across our globe. Extreme weather of seemingly biblical proportions, now a painful new normal.
Firefighters had been working in this area just a few days ago.
Again, man, you don't have to be in the fire.
To other areas now.
Pat,
you can see obviously the
get
fire
out of there,
is
Pat.
starting again here.
There are at least 93 active wildfires burning in Siberia, over 2.8 million acres destroyed. Some villages in the region evacuated. In America's West, record heat, drought, and strong winds feeding blazes like the Dixie Fire up in Northern California. Now, the largest singular fire in the state's history.
It's a leveled ghost town out here. The surrounding areas still threatened. The air difficult to breathe because of the multiple hazards. Officials say could be weeks before families are allowed to return.
The 8 largest
Return
fires
where?
in
You were just in a
California
heap
have
of
all
ash.
occurred in the past 4 years. Unprecedented 116-degree heat in the Pacific Northwest and all-time record highs in Canada, causing hundreds of deaths earlier this summer. And if it's not record heat and fires, it's flooding. Yet again, Venice's iconic St.
Oh
Mark.
yeah, if anybody's a fan of Vosh, he had to take off of his stream for several days because it was just so goddamn hot in Oregon, in the Northeast. He couldn't do anything because up there, they're not equipped for that type of insane heat.
Park Square covered in water far earlier in the year than normal. These horrifying scenes from China, commuters trapped in chest-deep water in train cars, streets transformed into rivers after record rainfall in the center of the country.
How high was the water up to here?
That's here.
I was in Germany just 3
Holy
weeks ago,
shit.
the site of devastating floods after a once-in-1,000-year rainstorm killed at least 160 people.
There's so many people dead. You don't expect people to die in a flood in Germany.
Buildings in this medieval town, around since before the 15th century, were once thought to be able to stand the test of time.
15th
Now,
century.
potentially destroyed by one flood.
From floods that wipe out entire towns to fires that leave forests and homes burned, covered in ash, still smoldering.
I know it's a very tertiary concern, but all of that architecture and historical preservation of something from the 15th century just getting wiped out by climate change. Well, where are all the billionaires now when they were donating a bunch of money to rebuild the roof of Notre Dame, but we actually need to fight climate change? Yeah, they're going to space. You know, who gives a shit? I'll see you on Mars.
Extreme, once-in-a-lifetime,
Right, the Notre
unprecedented
Dame
events
Cathedral.
are now becoming
That's right.
common, and scientists all point to one thing: climate change.
It is indisputable that human activities are causing climate change and making extreme weather events more frequent and severe. Second, it shows that climate change is affecting every region on our planet.
The UN's report confirming in the strongest language ever that the world is warming at a rate unprecedented in the last 2,000 years. And the report says we, humans, are to blame. Our actions have us at the breaking point, even if we meet the goals of the Paris
Well,
Climate.
they were just showing a bunch of plastic bottles, and I know John Oliver did a segment about the plastics industry beginning of the year where they want to put the owners on the consumer. They've actually pushed for those 1, 2, 3, 4 labels on the plastic containers so you feel responsible for all the plastic waste that's going out there, when in actuality, it's just cheaper for them to make virgin plastic and then sell it again, then take your recycled plastic, wash it, reuse it, and then sell it back to you. So all of the legislation for recycling, it's kind of bullshit. It's been a while since I've watched the segment, but if you haven't seen it, it's just one big scam. And the people we need to start regulating are the companies and corporations themselves to take responsibility for this.
Agreement to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
The number 1.5 degrees Celsius, there was this, ideally from the Paris Agreement, we would try to keep warming below that level. That looks like a pretty big challenge at this point.
Some impacts of climate change are now irreversible. Our behavior has altered our oceans, changed our planet's glaciers. In Greenland, the amount of ice that melted in the space of one day in July could cover the entire state of Florida in 2 inches of water. And no matter what we do, the ice melt is going to continue and get worse.
Changes in ice sheets, deep
Well,
ocean
good. Ben
temperature,
Shapiro says they'll just
and
move. They'll sell
acidification
their
will
home
continue
to Poseidon.
for centuries
They'll
to
get
thousands of
market
years,
value
meaning
because
that they are
the market dictates that you
irreversible
must
in our
move. So
lifetime
just sell it
and
to
will
the
continue
Atlanteans.
for generations to come.
The report concluding sea level rise may be one of the single biggest problems for the rest of the 21st century.
Even if you suddenly stop the increase in warming, you're going to still see melting for decades to come.
What's different about this report? Well, just how confident scientists are about the conclusions.
So this report was produced by over 200 scientists from 65 countries.
I still can't believe that there are people out there that say that climate change just isn't real. Or even if it is real, then, humans have nothing to do with it. How could you be so arrogant to think that humans could be affecting the climate? It's like, well, yeah, there's 8 billion of us on the planet. We're basically just destroying it as a cancer on the planet by allowing emissions to go up into the atmosphere for decades now. And the real pisser is that I think it's about 100 companies that account for the vast majority of carbon emissions. Actually, I'll let this play. I'll try to look
They worked for 3 years together to assess huge amounts of scientific information, over 14,000 studies and research papers.
Data from the past 8 years has the scientific community more confident than ever before that humans are the cause of what's happening to our planet. But it doesn't have to be this way. While more warming is expected in the coming decades, it's not too late to change trends if humanity changes behaviors now.
We can't undo the mistakes of the past. This generation can make the systemic changes that will stop the planet warming, help everyone adapt to the new conditions, and create a world of peace, prosperity, and equity. Climate change is here now, but we are also here now. And if we don't act, who will?
So here's an article from the Guardian. Just 100 companies responsible for 71% of global emissions, study says. These 100 companies here, if we just start reining them in a bit and start holding them accountable for the damages that they've done to the planet, now it would have taken a time machine go back 20, 30 years to start reining this in, maybe some sort of carbon capture program. Because when there's nationalized companies like China Coal, which they think accounted for 14% over the last 60 years of global climate emissions, that's not something that the U.S. alone could regulate, which is why something like the Paris Climate Accords was a good thing that we got into. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. And when Trump pulled out of it, signaled to the rest of the world that, not only are they not with us, they don't really give a shit about the climate, they don't care about what's coming. So this report was just inevitable. We were never on track or even doing well. The states tried for a while to meet our Paris climate goals. It was going to take a national and multinational effort for us to stave off some of the worst effects of climate change. The world saw that the U.S. was not going to lead on that, which is exactly what we needed to do.
A call to action tonight from the United Nations. Maggie Rulli joins us now from Greece. And Maggie, as we saw in your piece, you've been in 2 disaster zones just in the past few weeks there in Greece and, of course, the flooding in Germany. These extreme weather events taking such an emotional toll on these communities. How are people that you're talking to responding to it all?
Looks like the Earth is dying and the ocean is going to swallow us up. So I don't think we need to get Maggie's 2 cents on it. I guess we really need to start investing in some green infrastructure. Speaking of which, let's take a look at our bipartisan infrastructure deal. So let's take a look at the original plan. So these here are in the billions, because the original one was going to be 2.6 trillion or 2,600 billion. So R&D and manufacturing, clean energy tax credits, resiliency, power infrastructure, which we desperately need. We need to update our power grid. So when it comes to the climate change portion, how do we think electric vehicles? Fucking zero for clean energy tax credits. It's such poetic justice that right as we struck this landmark legislation, the UN comes out and says, by the way, we're all going to burn alive if we don't do something right now. And how much do we get in clean energy tax credits for the normal people to try to make their homes more energy efficient? Fucking zero. It blows my mind. It is, Trent. It's the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter if I can drive on a bridge or in a tunnel if the ocean swallows it up. What does it matter? Yeah, public transit is nice, but what happens when the rail lines get swept off in another forest fire? All of these things, yeah, they're nice, but they're moot if we don't have a planet. So the biggest things that come out of it were R&D and manufacturing. So that's pretty broad. Funding research on climate change and energy. So what did we get? Fucking zero. Billions. This includes funding for public housing in areas that would disproportionately benefit women and people of color and people with disabilities, according to the White House. Community colleges, minor public schools. Okay. Again, something that we need, but, it doesn't matter if we don't have a planet. Healthcare, in-home care. But we played the semantics game with the Republicans for so long on what is actually infrastructure. I said this before on just spending in general. Throw everything under the umbrella of defense. What is healthcare? It's defense against dying. What are clean energy tax credits? It's defense against climate change. I'll blow our defense budget if it starts covering healthcare and clean energy to defend, because we're going to start seeing tens of millions of climate refugees from the equatorial line. So once that part of the world becomes uninhabitable, if people think that it's bad now at the southern border, fucking Ron DeSantis talking about Biden importing COVID when His state doesn't even touch Mexico. Baffling to me that he's going to bitch about immigration at the southern border, which his president broke and threw people in cages. But that's the real issue. I can't wait to see his head explode when he sees climate refugees from half of South America. So what's shrank? Electric vehicles down to 15 billion. It almost doesn't make sense to invest in electric vehicles at this point. So the power infrastructure, which I'm going to assume is to start moving it over to green energy. And that's one of the arguments against electric vehicles when they tell you that, you have to plug it in and the power grid itself is dirty energy. So essentially, you're still consuming fossil fuels. Even when they take down the electric vehicle investment, it almost doesn't matter because unless we move over our power infrastructure to a green and reliable energy, we're just going to be burning fossil fuels through a plug-in and not through a tailpipe. So we did get $5 billion more to clean up abandoned wells and mines. I mean, that's good. That's like spitting on a fire. Western water infrastructure, again, good. But one of the problems with the Western infrastructure in water is it is now a sought-after commodity where it is even traded in the stock market. It's becoming Mad Max in the West, where I think the ticker is WTR. These are actually traded commodities. Water, one of the most essential components to life, is now a traded commodity. It's just another side effect of a hyper-capitalistic society where every corporation and everybody's just trying to squeeze every last dollar out of everybody. There's no public good anymore. We don't invest in public infrastructure. This is just as sad as that UN climate report. Hey guys, we need to do something right fucking now, or we're not gonna make it. And we come up with this plan with no clean energy tax credit, no R&D in manufacturing for green energy. We don't invest in electric vehicles. The power infrastructure gets watered down. I don't even know if this is going to get passed by the House. Exactly, Drain. There better be budget reconciliation. Because if we don't at least have budget reconciliation with a broad Green New Deal of some sort, we are fucked. And that was even when people on the left that I agree with 99% of the time, but when they started going completely Bernie or bust or rad lib, at least with Biden in the White House, we have a chance. We have a chance to at least pass something through budget reconciliation and get the infrastructure and green investment that we need. After that rant on the complete doomerism of climate change, let's hope we can pull a rabbit out of the hat here. To use a sports analogy, it's the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, full count. You got to put some runs on the board, or that's it. So if you don't know who Robert Reich is, he was a professor at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. As I mentioned earlier in the stream, former Secretary of Labor during the Clinton administration. Some of his signature policies that he put forward during that time, the Family Medical Leave Act. So yeah, he successfully lobbied to increase minimum wage to $5.15, which was up from $4.25. This is back in 1996. It passed, only a 90-cent increase, but I guess, it's better than nothing. In that time, he popularized the term corporate welfare. In 2002, he actually ran for governor of Massachusetts, and he was the first one to run on a platform to support same-sex marriage, which was the first in the nation to do so in a governor's race. Ultimately, he did lose that primary, came in second place with 25%, and then the winner of that primary went on to lose to none other than Mittens Romney. But yeah, he's a fairly progressive guy. If you don't know him, look into him. He runs Inequality Media, his activist movement, and he's been lately putting out a plethora of videos really condensed down what's going on with the younger generations. And this one here we're going to take a look at is why are millennials so broke? Why are young people so broke?
There's a narrative out there that millennials and the Generation Z's behind them are lazy.
What do you think of millennials? Coddled, entitled?
Yes, I think so.
Millennials don't get off the couch very often.
Millennials don't want jobs.
Well, that is just bunk. The reason a lot of young people are not doing nearly as well as their parents at this stage is that they're paying huge amounts, much more than their parents ever paid as a proportion of their paychecks, for education, higher education, or student debt, housing, for rent, healthcare, even transportation. All of these costs have increased faster than inflation. And at the same time, jobs are not paying that much more. We know that 1 in 10 college graduates are underemployed. And by underemployed, we mean that they are not spending 40 hours a week doing things that are challenging and taking advantage of their education. 1 out of 20 are
So underemployed, or you have a college degree, but you wait tables.
unemployed. In the post-World War II era, We have never seen anything like this. That was, we have always expected that we're going to do better. Individuals and families are going to do better. They're going to be trading upward, and their children are expected to do better than they have done. And that's been the case. For the first time now, we see the pendulum moving in exactly
100%.
the
Robert
opposite
Reich for
direction.
president.
Today, more than ever before, your chance of getting ahead as a young person is dependent on the parents you have and their income and their wealth. We are on the verge of the largest intergenerational wealth transfer in history. We got 74 million baby boomers. They've never done so well. I mean, they are raking it in. With all of the problems and challenges that young people are facing, you've got this extra resource that is going to be going to those small slice of millennials and Generation Zs who have wealthy parents and grandparents. If nothing changes, the two-tiered society we have right now is going to become even wider in terms of the gap between the haves and the have-nots. One of the most important things is to make college free. The other thing we need to do is make healthcare cheaper. We've got to have a single-payer plan. We also can do a much better job with regard to affordable housing. I just want to give information and analysis that's useful, and I want to inspire action and change, because we can't go on the way we are going right now.
So Robert Reich, he's published a multitude of books, put out 2 movies. One that I know for a fact is Inequality for All. And in that movie, he talks about the second term of Bill Clinton's administration. He essentially felt forced out by the Treasury Secretary, who of course was an ex-Goldman Sachs guy. I don't remember off the top of my head. But that's when Bill Clinton, he never really transitioned, but really started pushing for that bipartisan behavior with Newt Gingrich. He became a consensus president poll watcher as opposed to a progressive Democrat. We all know about his crime bill of the 90s. So he began doing those bipartisan deals with Republicans at that time, really essentialized what a neoliberal is. If you want to picture a neoliberal, it's Bill Clinton to a T. Essentially, he was a conservative Republican in a blue tie and played a saxophone. So the points that he was making in this video, I broke down into several areas. You know, millennials and Gen Zs are lazy and entitled. Young people are not doing as well as their parents because of education costs, housing costs, healthcare costs, transportation, and all of the above have risen faster than inflation. So one of the studies that I looked at and pulled up for this was done by Young Invincibles. So this really broke down the dichotomy between the baby boomer generation and the millennial generation. We see these few points. Millennials earn less than their parents do. Fewer millennials own their homes. Millennials have accumulated half the assets as boomers. Young adult net worth has declined by half in a generation. The dichotomy between the two generations is even farther exacerbated, as we'll see, when you draw it along racial lines. White millennials aren't doing as well as their parents, and black millennials and Latino millennials are not doing as well as their parents, but they were already so far behind, as we'll see in this study. So I keep this running research document so I can try to educate through my streams and advocate for more progressive policy based on the data that I see here. So some of the main quotes I'm seeing: young workers today between 24 and 36 earn $40,000 a year. So if you're a millennial, you know that $40,000 a year is not going to get you jack shit. But when adjusted for inflation, that's about $10,000 a year less than their parents were earning at the same time. Now, one of the more staggering quotes and findings that I found in this study was that in 1989, boomers with college debt had a net worth of $86,500. Our net worth completely bottomed out to $6,600. And every time I go on CNBC or Fox News, CNN, really anybody really taking the piss on the millennial generation, that we're lazy, that we're entitled. Well, the lazy thing, we have also evidence to show that not only are we not lazy, we're borderline workaholics, and we're the most productive generation ever in American history. That's due to the proliferation of cell phones, working from home, which has only gotten worse. Not even including the work I put into the channel, I'm already putting in 10-hour days just at my initial job to keep up with the demand. I work in the financial sector, so I can't really complain that much. But when you see the stark difference of the averages of millennials earning $40,000 a year, these pundits have the balls to go on news channels and say, oh, millennials always on their phones. For fuck's sake, Socrates hated the generation below him. But the complete antipathy towards the millennial generation is not only unwarranted, it just seems nasty at this point. So I pulled a few tables to further emphasize my rage towards these people. Boomers were earning $50,900, we're earning $40,000. Intergenerational transfer of wealth, and you can see it clear as day in this chart right here, figure 1.2. Even though they're not making nearly as much as their baby boomer counterparts at this time, and I believe, 2013 was the date that they took, I wouldn't be surprised if it is even less now. So the intergenerational transfer of wealth, so degrees without debt, even though they're making less, they are better off because they don't have that ball and chain behind them. Now, this is just the income that they make. This isn't taking into consideration the net worth. So whites making 21% less than their counterparts. African Americans, Latinos are doing a bit better. African Americans have been stagnant for generations now. A third of the country does not want to address. So here's the real chart that did it for me. Younger white adults enjoy net worth 10 times higher than young African Americans. So although we do see that we're enjoying a net worth that is 10 times higher, look how low the African American net worth is. For whites, it's $16,000, age 25 to 34 in 2013, which is not great. But African Americans' median net worth, $1,600. That is just fucking unforgivable. And it's less than what they were making in 1989, but not even by that much. I'm sure we'll see that the COVID recession is not in these figures, but I'm sure it has had an effect on that K-shaped recovery for young professionals who can work from home, and then blue-collar workers, the real working class, not just miners in West Virginia. They were never even close to their white counterparts to begin with. The only reason we've gotten closer is because now everybody's getting screwed. So I would argue not even just the states need to reinvest in public education system. The federal government needs to invest in public education systems. We have moved past the point where we could subsidize at the state level for the exploding college tuition at these universities. There need to be free public systems. It can be subsidized by the state, but that should also be further subsidized with help from the federal government, because it's not like we don't have the resources. Put it under the umbrella of defense. Who gives a shit? We need to defend education. We need to defend against brain drain or competition from other countries. Create pipelines into middle class through middle skill jobs. Agreed. So even if you don't want to go and get a degree, more middle skill jobs, maybe 2-year apprenticeships, community colleges. This is addressing people who have taken on student loan debt and did not finish with a college degree. There needs to be attainment goals and incentives to get there, because the private industry is not going to start giving you signing bonuses. I mean, you'll hear CNBC jerk themselves off these days saying, even McDonald's today will give you a signing bonus. It's such a joke. We'll give you $100 to apply. I don't know, maybe step up to the market pressures that the economy has now thrown at you. You're all free market capitalists until it comes time to raise your employees' wages. The private sector is not going to start giving you signing bonuses unless you have really highly sought after degrees in certain fields. I know a buddy of mine, he got a signing bonus, but he majored in genetics. Highly competitive fields, biomedicals. And on the East Coast, biomedicals and pharmaceutical fields are very prevalent here. I think it would be just more effective and efficacious if we just made public universities. So even if you had to pause for a certain time, you don't have to take on massive student loan debts. Pause your education. You have to work for a bit, or you can do night classes without taking on gargantuan amounts of debt. We just saw, which I think is a good piece of legislation come from the Biden administration, which was the child tax rebate, payments to people who have kids, a check in the mail from the federal government that acts as Social Security for children to lift children out of poverty. Even though I do not have kids, that is good, writ large, for the working class. And I believe in that policy. But expanding the earned income tax credit for childless workers who have such a huge financial burden already on our plate, we're not earning as much as our parents, our net worth is much lower, we don't feel comfortable having children, we think it's possibly irresponsible to have them. I think expanding that earned income tax credit to childless workers would help stimulate the economy. I think that would have to go hand in hand with canceling student loan debt, which I might have to cover in another stream. I was planning on shoehorning that in here as well, because that study actually argues that is more progressive the more college student loan debt that you forgive, and that's based on the methodology of intergenerational wealth. It's a very interesting study. I believe Sam Cedar covered it, debated destiny on it. Millennials are actually workaholics according to research. taking paid vacation. Millennials don't take paid vacation, almost ever. But from the study that we've already gone over, this seems pretty much in line with what we already know. I know people like Bernie Sanders, which I completely disagree with. He is advocating to keep the cap on the state and local income tax. I'm not a wealthy man by any means. I have tens of thousands in student loan debt outstanding. And of course, I'll be 30 in a few months. And eventually, I'd like to buy a house. I've been putting it off to try to stave off my student loans. And to buy a house in New Jersey, they have capped the state and local tax deduction from your federal. So Trin and I, we've been looking at houses that we technically can afford. But when we get slammed with that state tax, it's essentially a wealth tax on the middle class. So when Bernie Sanders says it's only for rich people to not pay taxes, okay, but up to what point? They've capped it at $10K. So just to buy a normal middle class house in the state of New Jersey, I'm gonna have to pay thousands of dollars extra on top of my mortgage just to live in the state that I work in, where my family is, where my friends are. It seems like he's picking the wrong battle, in my opinion. I know he is technically correct, but I think at that point, then you should argue for keeping the state and local tax deduction, but upping the cap, maybe to 20%, 25%. That would be a more reasonable conclusion to reach than taking a look at even just middle class workers on the coast and saying, you know what, you're too rich. It's like, I'm streaming in a closet right now. I don't feel very rich. But again, that's why, I'm a Warren supporter. These list of policies that were meant to stimulate the middle class, like the GI Bill and subsidization of mortgages through the Federal Housing Administration. But these, by and large, across the board, disallowed African Americans, and if you don't believe me, look at the charts we just had, disallowed African Americans from participating in those programs. So even though we have this idea of, it's like a MAGA mentality, they want to make America great again in that sense, but also to the point where they are excluding minorities. They don't want them to start participating at the same rates and building wealth at the same rates as their white counterparts. They think they're getting some sort of handout, but when whites were getting handouts post-World War II, it was all gravy. So that's really where I want to leave it for today. Thank you again so much for joining. Have a great night, guys.